You may have heard that chickens are an easy and low-maintenance animal to keep, and you're right. But how much time do chickens actually need? Today, we're going to look at exactly how much time your chicken flock needs to be happy and healthy. We're going to look at that from a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and yearly time commitment so you can really understand how much time chickens need and if you have enough time to get yourself a flock of chickens. Looking after my chickens on a daily basis takes about 10 to 15 minutes, and that consists of going to feed them twice a day, which takes about 5 minutes each time. So I'm mixing up their feed, taking it out to them and feeding them. While I'm out there feeding them, I'm looking at them, making sure that they're happy, healthy, behaving well, no one looks a bit off or sick, that they have their appetite, that they're getting in there and eating the food. So I'm using that time while I'm out there giving them their food just to keep an eye on them, make sure I've had eyes on every single one of my flock members and that everyone looks like they're doing fine. Also, while I'm out there with my flock at feeding time, I'm just keeping an eye on their waterers. So I'm just glancing at the waterers to make sure that there's water in them, that they're clean, that nobody's come and pooped in it or scratched anything into it. So if that's happened, I'll deal with it. But usually it's just a quick glance to make sure that the water level is good and the water is clean. So that 2 feedings a day takes about 10 minutes, and while I'm out there in that 10 minutes, I'm keeping an eye on things, making sure everything is going well. And of course, you need to go out and collect your chickens' eggs every day. Some people collect them twice a day. I just collect them once a day in the evening, or I will sometimes collect them after I've done the afternoon feeding. Whatever works. It depends on the season, really, because an afternoon feeding in the winter is a lot closer to bedtime than an afternoon feeding in the summer. So it varies, but every day I go out and check the eggs. Now, usually that's nice and quick, sort of 3-minute job and it's done. But if my chickens have decided to give me a bit of a treasure hunt, it might take a bit longer, so maybe 5 minutes, maybe 7 minutes, depending on the day. Usually they're quite nice to me and all lay in one spot in the coop, and it's easy. I grab the eggs. Sometimes I have to go and check multiple locations that I know which ones to check, so it just takes me a little tiki tour around and I've got it done. But sometimes I get a little bit suspicious that I'm not getting enough eggs and I have to go on a longer treasure hunt to search out any locations they might have added to the list of places they like to lay. So in that case, it might take a bit longer, but you wouldn't have to go on an epic search every day. So that's what's required every day. 10 to 15 minutes, feeding, checking waterers, making sure everybody's happy, and collecting eggs. Brings us to weekly tasks, which takes an extra 10 to 15 minutes on top of daily tasks, just once a week. For me, my weekly tasks are checking the waterers to make sure that they're all still totally fine, and I also empty out the water, scrub them really well, and refill them with fresh water. Now, in the summertime, you might have to do that more frequently, depending on the size of your waterer and where it's located. So if it's getting sunlight and it's not very big, you're probably going to have to check it, top it up, clean it more frequently than once a week. But if it's in the shade and it's quite big, it's got plenty of water in it, you might still be fine to stay on that weekly cycle. I always make sure, no matter what time of year, that I scrub and refill both of my chicken waterers every single week. The other thing I do on a weekly basis is just do a little bit of a deeper check than my daily checks to make sure that the run fences are looking good, that nest boxes still have enough bedding, and that they're clean. So I just do a little cruise around, checking on all those little bits and pieces. If the fence is sagging a bit, I'll stand it up again. And if there's anything that needs a bit more attention, I'll make a mental note of that and I'll get to it in my monthly tasks when I have dedicated a little bit more time to getting those jobs done. So those are the weekly tasks, nice and simple, 5 to 10 minutes, making sure waterers are clean and sparkling and full of fresh water, and just keeping an eye on any further issues in your coop and run to make sure you're always on top of everything. Now we're up to monthly tasks. Now these take a little bit more time, so dedicate maybe 1 to 2 hours a month to making sure that you're keeping on top of your chicken related tasks. So for me, that is doing a coop clean, a small coop clean. So I use the deep litter method in my coop. So when I go in to clean it every month, I am just scraping off the top layer, putting it out into my composting chicken run and putting down fresh bedding. I'm also checking nest boxes and probably changing the bedding in the nest boxes, doing a little sweep around because chickens do make a lot of dust. A lot of dust comes off chickens, so I clean that up and I just do a little bit of a check to see that there are no parasites. I'm not seeing any signs of parasites being in the coop, and if I am seeing signs of that, well then that goes into my mental note of something I need to deal with. So the coop clean is what I do every month. Now I have 2 coops managed a little bit differently, but in my main coop it's a deep litter system, so I'm clearing that out and checking nest boxes, changing bedding. And in my other coop, it is mostly just nest boxes where the chickens lay eggs because they don't really feel like sleeping in that one. So I'm just checking, making sure everything is fresh and clean and not too poopy. So that's just a little check, mostly more than anything else. I add extra organic materials to the back end of my composting chicken run, which isn't the wood chip side. So in the side where I don't have wood chips, I'm adding straw or cut grass or whatever, things like that, just to keep the compost level topped up in there so we're not going down to a muddy soil mess. So I'm keeping an eye on the material level, the substrate, the floor of the back end of my composting run and making sure it's staying all good. So that's what I do every month to make sure the composting run system keeps on working. I don't need to worry about the wood chip run on a monthly basis. That is a yearly job. This is also the time that I address any maintenance issues that I've spotted on my weekly checks. So I fix up fences more, and any smaller tasks I make sure I get done, like fixing up things, or if hinges are getting wobbly, things like that, I just attend to them on my monthly chicken run and coop deeper checks. And the final thing I do on a monthly basis is I write down any relevant notes that have occurred during that month about the chicken flock and how they are and what I have done with them. So I write down those notes because you'll forget. Everyone's gonna forget. You'll get to the next year and you go, oh, what happened that month last year? You'll have no idea. So I try to stay disciplined in writing down just a little month summary, a few lines of what's happened that month with the chicken flock. Now we've arrived at quarterly tasks, so what you're going to do every 3 months. And the biggest thing that you need to really keep an eye on this sort of every 3-month cycle is parasite management. You don't necessarily need to treat for parasites as regularly as every 3 months, but you definitely want to be keeping an eye on it. So every 3 months I am checking to see if I'm seeing any symptoms of parasites being present in my chickens, and if I'm seeing some, then I am going ahead and doing a parasite treatment, which depending on which one I'm using is either something that they're going to have in their food for every day for 7 days, or it might be a once in their feed and then 7 to 10 days later another time in their feed. So that's dealing with internal and external parasites on the chickens. And the other thing you need to think about in terms of parasites is parasites in the coop. So you've been keeping an eye on that on a monthly basis, but I like to sort of act a bit preventatively as well. So every 3 months I am putting in preventative measures into the coop. So I'm doing a really good clean and I'm looking to see if I can see any signs of mites or lice being in the coop. And then I am putting mite powder under the nest box bedding, and I am painting around the edges of perches. So where they join to the wall of my coop, I am putting some oil, some essential oils into some neem oil and a little bit of carrier oil, and I'm painting plugging it into the cracks there to help to prevent parasites from becoming a problem. And another thing that you can do to help prevent parasites is to release biological controls. You can release predator mites into your coop. So if you've done that, then you don't want to be too aggressive with mite powder or your perch painting and things, because you don't want to kill the predator mites, but you do want to be taking a really good look to make sure that if you do have those biological controls, that they're still alive and working. Even if you can't see them, you should be able to see whether you've got mites or lice hanging out in your coop, so you know what you need to do to make sure that situation doesn't get out of control. Every 3 months is when I also like to take the time to really fix up any major maintenance issues if I can, if it's within my wheelhouse. Otherwise, I organize for someone to come and help me with it. So that's things like if a hole has come into a coop, or if wire is starting to get saggy, you want to get on top of that before it becomes a problem. So any bigger tasks, you can make the time to get this done on a quarterly basis. And then, of course, you want to keep an eye on your supplies. So I like to keep all my chicken stuff in just 1 or 2 places. And then every 3 months, I like to just do a little inventory. Do I have enough pine shavings to go into the coop? Do I have enough first aid supplies? Are the parasite supplies, parasite management supplies, are they still all good? Do I have them? Do I need to make a little shopping list and go and top up my supplies? Because the last thing you want to do is for something to not be there when you need it. So it's really a good idea to just stay on top of your supplies so you have what you need when you need it, and that's going to ultimately save you time. So these quarterly jobs, depending on what they are, because coop maintenance can be a bit of a sliding scale, but it's going to take an extra sort of 1 to 2 hours on top of your monthly and weekly and daily tasks. And I, of course, like to make sure I'm writing those notes into my diary, my chicken journal, to make sure that I absolutely know what's going on. I take a note of any maintenance things. I write down notes about what I'm observing from a parasite management perspective. So try to remember to get that information into your notes, because it's going to be invaluable to reference back to later. Yearly tasks are the big jobs. You're going to want to set aside 1 to 2 days to do these, but you don't have to do them very often, only once a year. So for me, my big yearly jobs are the compost harvest out of the compost chicken run, where I dig out the finished compost, take it out to the garden beds, and then refresh the wood chip mulch. So that's in the main wood chip mulch side. So that's once a year, pull it all out, put in the new stuff so it can keep going for hopefully another full year. So that's a big job. It takes quite a bit of time, half a day, sometimes even a whole day. The other thing I like to do on a once a year basis is do a big, massive coop clean. So that means digging out all of the bedding that's been in there. So instead of just the top surface coming off and new bedding going in, it is moving everything out, all the bedding out, shoveling that out into the run. And I usually pressure wash the chicken coop inside and out, make sure that everything is nice and clean. And what I like to do is to lime wash or whitewash the chicken coop, because I do find that it really does help with managing parasites that like to live in your coop. So once a year, I will get on in and refresh the lime wash in the coop. And again, that takes quite a while. It takes several hours to get a coop pressure washed and lime washed and ready to go. But they don't have to be done that often, but they are really, really good tasks to get done. They will help you with your management for the rest of the year. While I'm getting stuck into these long sort of all-day jobs, I like to take the time to think about sort of what's been going on during the year. Are things working? Are my management systems working? Do I want to change anything? What about the flock composition? You know, are all the hens getting along? Are the roosters okay? So I just like to have a good think about, take the time to really think about what's been going on for the chicken flock and the way I've been managing them and if it's working. So it is good to take time to reflect on your practices, to think about what is working and what isn't working, and if something's not working, to think about what changes you can make to make it work more effectively. And as always, I like to get notes into my chicken journal so that I can write about these things that I'm thinking, oh, this worked this year, this didn't work this year, how was the year in general? So get those things on paper, because when you're 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the track, it's going to be really great to look back at that and see how your chicken keeping has evolved over time and through different seasons and different years. Now, these jobs don't have to be done all at once, just in one point of the year. So in my system, I do the compost harvest in the wintertime, but I don't do the coop clean out until sort of the late springtime when it's warming up and it's going to get dry faster with the pressure washing and the lime wash going on. So you don't have to just be like, oh, I need 2 days and one big thing and it's going to be a big job. You can just do one thing at one point of the year and another thing at a different point of the year, whatever works for your lifestyle and your climate. So it doesn't have to be just you must do these things at exactly the same time. There's a lot of flexibility in this. This video is all just about giving you an idea of the total time commitment, how you distribute that time out, particularly in the monthly, quarterly, and yearly jobs. Really depends on you and what works for you and your situation. Chickens really are a nice low maintenance animal that don't really need a huge amount of your time, but they do need some of it. So long as you can commit to that daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly cycle, you're going to be able to keep chickens. It's going to be fantastic. There are some things you can do to make it even easier for yourself, particularly for the weekly and monthly tasks. If you get them on a schedule, it's going to help you keep on track. So if you're like, every Tuesday I'm going to clean the chicken waterers, it helps you to just get into a routine and you don't have to be constantly remembering things. You just know, oh, it's Tuesday, it's waterer cleaning day. So get on a bit of a routine. But for the big jobs, you can slot them in where it works for you in your schedule. You don't have to be like, oh my goodness, it's been 3 months and 2 weeks longer. You know, it doesn't matter for getting those jobs done. You don't have to be like this time, this day of the month, every single time. It can be flexible. Chickens are pretty cruisy. So long as you actually get to the jobs, you're going to be okay. Investing in quality equipment is going to help you in the long run. So that is things like getting good quality waterers and a good quality chicken coop and making sure that your bedding is of good quality. All of those things will help save you time because things are not going to break as often. There's going to be less maintenance to do. So if you can invest in good quality equipment before you get started, it's really going to save you time and hassle and worry further down the line. Keeping organized with your supplies is also a really good idea that will save you a lot of time in terms of losing things and going back and forwards, or potentially buying things that you didn't need because you couldn't find it. So picking just 1 or 2 spots where you keep all of your chicken keeping supplies will help you to stay organized, help you to quickly do your 3 monthly inventory, and help you know exactly where the thing is that you need when you need it. If you can commit to that routine, and it's not that hard, you can absolutely keep chickens. The time investment is far outweighed by the joy of having those crazy critters running around in your backyard, by fresh eggs that are being laid and collected by you every day, and by just all the things that chickens bring to your life, the compost, the natural pest control. They're fantastic. You're going to love having them, and it's really not that hard to keep chickens.